Howdy everyone, this is the Champion 4500 watt gasoline only powered manual start inverter generator, and it is excellent. In this video we're going to perform a super quick unbox, set her up, run some side-by-side decibel tests with a smaller generator, take a look at what she'll do when hooked up to an RV, and then finally render some conclusions. So let's get to it. It does ship in a large box that clearly indicates what's inside. Just a heads up in case your neighborhood is plagued by porch pirates. In fact, Amazon was even kind enough to leave my copy right in front of my driveway to make their job easier. Specs wise, this product is more or less in the ballpark of many other 4,000-ish watt inverter generators. We're looking at a 2.3 gallon fuel capacity, a 212cc engine, 14 hours of quarter load runtime, 120 volts, 3,500 running, and 4,500 starting watts. Opening up the box, we notice a couple of accessories. In addition to the generator itself, we've got a little 8-10 millimeter combo wrench, an oil funnel, some 10W30, and a spark plug wrench. Pretty nice of them to include everything but gas to get going. The unit itself is pretty heavy, weighing 95 pounds dry. I was able to perform a little poor form deadlift to remove it, but can see it being right on the border of being too much for one person to lift to tailgate height. Up on my work table, and I have to say that initial impressions are very good. External build quality is fantastic and right up there with Honda. Of course, that's to say nothing about the engine itself, and I still assume the more expensive Japanese-made alternative is much better in that regard, but still, the Champion does impress from a fit and finish standpoint. To get her ready to go, we first need to remove some transportation retention bolts. Start by lifting the unit vertical. The manufacturer recommends doing this on some type of non-marring surface. I just used some of the styrofoam from its packaging. Next, use a 10 millimeter wrench or socket to remove the 4 orange colored plate washers and associated bolts. These can then be discarded. It's now time for oil. To access the fill plug and dipstick, there is a small panel on the recoil side of the machine that can be removed by turning its latch. We can now remove the dipstick and fill with the included oil. They've provided just enough to get going. I also really appreciate the fact that Champion has supplied a custom fit funnel that makes filling a breeze. After approximately 500 milliliters or half a quart is poured in, our dipstick reading confirms we're good to proceed to fueling. Here I'm using the Garage Boss Press and Pour, which in my opinion is the only post-2009 gas can that doesn't make a mess. You know, kind of how things used to be before the government came in and messed things up. If you're interested in this or even the generator itself, I'll place a link below. It's an associate link for which will earn the channel a small commission. Use is greatly appreciated. Anyhow, I dumped in 2 gallons of fuel mixed with Stable 360. It's pretty much what I always use in generators because A, it's not always clear if there's ethanol blended in, and B, I never exactly know how long the generator might sit without use. Adding this fuel stabilizer helps with both of those problems. To fire it up, we first need to move the easy dial over to the choke position, then it's finally time to pull the cord. And 11 tugs later, it finally fired up. Also, please don't judge me for letting it idle with the choke on for a couple seconds. After 10 plus pulls, I had kind of forgot that it was not set to run. So now, let's talk about operation. The front panel here is very nicely laid out. Everything is pretty high quality feeling. This has nice indents on it for your off, run, and start or choke position. It's not dampened though. The manufacturer does include a little 2.5 amp USB charger for your 12 volt plug there if you wanted to use it to charge USB devices or not. We do have some dust caps on the plugs here. We have our 15 amp plugs right here. I'm sorry, 20 amp plugs right here, and then our 30 amp, I think it's a TT30R for RVs. Each of these has resettable fuses right here, also with little dust caps on it. The Intelligauge, it displays a few things. I'll try and do an overlay here. I can't, it's only on when this thing is running, which would make it kind of hard to record this right now if that was the case. But basically it displays frequency, which is pretty much always just going to be 60 Hertz. It displays current output voltage, and you can see that drop a little bit. Usually when it's completely on idle, it'll run at 122 volts, and then it'll drop down to about 117 right before it cuts out under full load. It also displays current runtime, which is basically just a timer from when you started it, and then total runtime, which is really convenient for things like managing maintenance schedules. Let's see, down here we have our parallel ports. So here's one thing I kind of don't like about this unit, is that it uses this Champion proprietary plugs, like this square plug for paralleling with other units. Pretty much every other manufacturer uses this more universal round style, so I kind of wish they didn't go that route. But really on the front, that's my only nitpicky complaint on these. Oh, and then we also have this load indicator here. It's not a precise thing. It only has 5 gradations, but basically 0% means there's no load on it, and then 100% is going to be pretty much 4,500 watts right before this thing cuts out. For the next several hours, my plan was to just let it run. The official break-in period is 5 hours. Over this time, Champion recommends periodically varying the load while not exceeding 50%, so I did precisely that. Most of the time I just left it to idle, but would periodically step outside and run this 6 to 1500 watt heat gun. Other than that, I pretty much just let it go, but with all this downtime, I was able to answer one big question. Just how loud is the Champion 4500 watt generator? To find out, I've got my decibel meter set up 15 feet in front of the unit. I've also got an AC clamp meter measuring amps at the power source. Furthermore, I'll be comparing it to a less powerful Predator 2000. My hypothesis is that the smaller generator is likely going to be quieter at idle, but when they're both providing 1500 watts, the larger one will do so at lower RPMs and thus be lower in volume. So let's see how that pans out. At low idle, which is what we call eco mode, we're looking at about 66.5 decibels. That's pretty good. The manufacturer claims 61, but their reading was at 23 feet, about 8 further away than mine, so that sounds reasonable. I don't want to bore you with a bunch of footage watching me walk back and forth as I vary the load, so real quick, here's how the Predator started off before we get to results. A little over 67 on eco with no load. Ultimately, the Champion ended up being quieter than the Predator at all power draw levels, even besting the smaller generator when neither was under any load. That said, the idle results are really within a decibel of one another, so I consider that near as makes no difference. The Predator runs into overload territory at about 14 amps or 1680 watts and 75 decibels. At this power draw level, the Champion is much quieter, registering only 71. Remember, decibels are logarithmic, so 4 can be significant. We did eventually hit 76 decibels on the Champion, but only after getting up to 26 amps or 3120 watts. The bottom line is that if noise is a big concern for you, it does make sense to purchase a generator that would otherwise exceed your power needs. Finally, keep in mind that noise level will vary depending on the unit's orientation. Just a few inches from the front, we're at 73, while that same distance from the back near the exhaust, we see 85. Moving on. As I mentioned earlier, this unit is much heavier than the 2000 watt-ish units that some may be familiar with. It weighs about twice as much, and while there's not much the manufacturer can do to help move it vertically, they do provide a solution once it's on the ground. Here, we've got a nice fold-out handle used to wheel it around. It feels very stout, with the arms being made of heavy plastic and the handle being cast aluminum. This setup makes carting it around a one-hand job. It's also engineered in a way so that the handle can be used to both pull and push. Very well done. Now for me personally, the biggest question I had when moving from a 2000 to a 4500 watt generator was how well it could run my travel trailer. The smaller unit could sometimes start the AC if I had literally everything else off. Well, my friends, I'm pleased to report that the Champion handles this small Airstream without any issue. Just for fun, I turned everything on: the 13,500 BTU AC, the microwave, all the lights, and I let the batteries charge. All told, I think I topped out at just over 18 amps, while the Champion wasn't even registering 50% on its load meter. Just awesome. Also, I'm not sure if you can hear it, but there is an odd vibration sound audible right now. But don't worry, it's only because the fold-out handle wasn't fully seated against the frame and was rattling against it. Nothing to worry about. So bottom line, can this product run a travel trailer with an AC? Absolutely. Okay, the last thing I wanted to show you guys before wrapping up are a couple of maintenance procedures. Now that our 5-hour break-in period is complete, it's time for an oil change. Luckily, Champion makes this super easy with an actual drain valve. Just pull it out and twist off the cap. Unfortunately, as I found here, it comes out very, very slowly. So I gave up trying to hold the old oil bottle by hand and made a little makeshift drip pan out of a paper plate. At that point, I walked away for about 10 minutes to let it weep out. When it finally stopped dripping, it's time to once again fill using the fantastically included funnel. I'm going with STP5W30 Full Synthetic because it was the cheapest brand I could find, and according to the owner's manual, it's kind of like an all-season weight. Oh, and just one more thing. I wanted to show you guys where all other maintenance is done. On the opposite side of the machine, 2 screws get removed and then you simply pull off the access panel. In here we've got easy access to the spark plug as well as the air filter. Nothing to do in here right now though, so that's for later. And that's about all I had. Overall, I think this is an outstanding machine. I can really only come up with one thing I'd like to see Champion do differently. The parallel ports that use a proprietary square plug instead of the common round ones. I wish that weren't the case. Otherwise, it's well built, has all the power I could see needing, is comparatively quiet, and surprisingly, because it's a US-based company, documentation is very good. Overall, highly recommended.